standpoint. Now, farmers in Nigeria are suffering huge losses due to a disruption of farming season caused by unusual and extreme weather. Experts are insisting that unless urgent and very drastic steps are immediately taken, the current food crisis in the country may worsen as floods and droughts continue to ravage farmlands in the northern states. 10 states, namely Kaduna, Kano, Jigawa, Nasarawa, Taraba, Bauchi, Zamfara, Yobe, Sokoto, and Kebbi, are highly affected following a spate of drought, after which heavy rainfall was witnessed in the region. Now, joining me to discuss the effect of this adverse weather on food production is an agribusiness analyst, Dr. Olukayode Oyeleye. Good to have you join us.
It's my pleasure. Good afternoon.
So, Dr. Oyeleye, I think it was 2 days or 3 days ago, we had the governor of Jigawa State complaining about the heavy rains in his state and how that has affected farming. I just wanted to speak, on that so that people understand what is going on. In some part, because that's the full belt of the country. In some part, it is drought. In some part, it is rain. For people who see these things, when the food is expensive, the first thing people think of is government or insecurity. But also speak to us about how climate change has largely affected food security.
Okay, thank you very much. The crisis of drought and flooding is actually a global phenomenon, although it happens, at the local level in various parts of the world. In recent times, Nigeria is beginning to have its own fair share of this global crisis, and very unfortunately, it's affecting our food security prospects very directly. Now, yes, of course, some parts of the country may be having drought, while some are having heavy rainfall. This is the practical reality of climate change. And even if you take it at the global level, the same thing is happening. While some parts of the world are having cold, now some tropical parts of the world are presently experiencing cold, especially even in this part of the world, in Africa and Nigeria. Some parts of the temperate regions are also currently experiencing excruciating heat. And so now coming back to the issue of flooding, while there are also droughts in some other places, the northern part of the country in which there have been cases of flooding, it can simply be explained this way. When there's torrential rainfall on a land that is open, the tendency to heavy runoff occurs, and that's what is usually called flash flooding. And it does a lot of damage because there are not too many obstacles like trees to slow down the movement of the water or to break down the droplets of the water when it is coming down as rain. And so they make direct impact on the land surface. Before they could be absorbed by the soil surface, a critical mass of that has actually amassed together and has formed flood, creating a lot of damage, drowning property, people, animals, and crops, and all of that. And so when this deluge actually occurs and affects farm settings, the tendency is to destroy a lot of crops that are still on the field yet to be harvested, and it could also affect those ones that are already harvested, that are in store, especially if where they are kept is in low-lying area. Now, I'll be quick to say this, that Nigerian government needs to sit back and think through how to respond to this crisis, because there are signs now that it's going to be an annually recurring issue. The past 2 years, that's 2022 and last year, and now there have been reports of flooding in various parts of the country, north and south of the country. And this year may not be an exception. Now, here is what I need to say, that weather reports, which actually have been generated by NIMET, they are mostly useful. The way they are presented, they are mostly useful for the aviation sector and probably maybe for some other industries. But for the agricultural sector, which actually is mostly in the rural areas, and in which case the stakeholders are mostly the farmers. The weather reports, weather forecasts, and other information relating to weather generated by NIMET needs to actually be brought to their level. It is not enough to create pamphlets. It is not enough to make radio jingles or
And
television
Dr.
jingles. It is very
whose responsibility?
Yes.
Whose responsibility is that? Because interesting point you just made. It was in 2023 that the Food and Agricultural Organization predicted that no fewer than 2.6 million Nigerians in Borno, Sokoto, and Zamfara states, and the FCT as well, may face food crisis between June and August this year. One would have thought that there would be proactive measures put in place to ensure that this is not the case. But whose responsibility is that? At what level?
Okay, it's a multi-level responsibility. Let's begin from the federal ministries. At no time in the history of Nigeria is the Federal Ministry of Environment more relevant to this discussion. Essentially, the Federal Ministry of Environment has a lot of role to play. Apart from the parastatal called NIMET, the ministry itself has a lot to do with weather, wide-ranging roles and responsibilities. And so it has to get more involved. The work of the Federal Ministry of Environment has to be felt more, by the various stakeholders, not only in agricultural sector, but generally when we talk about the issue of environment. Now, we will be talking also about inter-ministerial work, in which case you expect the Ministry of Environment to work with the ministries like Water Resources, Ministry of Agriculture, and in fact, interestingly, Ministry of Finance, because this is an existential crisis. And the earlier information about weather is disseminated, the better, so that the stakeholders would be able to make, based on early warning signals, early warning messages, they would be able to make preparation ahead of time, just so that a lot of crises associated with, let's begin with flood, will not meet them unawares. In case of drought, of course, they have usually a long time to be able to respond to drought. Mitigating efforts can be made, along the line, but flood usually comes all of a sudden. And so a lot has to be done by these various ministries working together, putting thoughts, resources, and manpower, together to be able to stave off the crisis of flooding. And I would say this, our major rivers in Nigeria are already silted up. They have become very shallow. If you look at River Niger, for instance, now, the depth is not what it used to be some 30, 40 years ago. The same goes with Benue. The same goes with some other inland rivers like Yobe River, like you mentioned some other rivers, Anambra. You mentioned some other rivers like, which are tributaries to these major rivers. They are generally silted up. And so the shallower these rivers are, the wider they distribute flood water along their flood plains. And so many of the communities that have been in those flood plains for years, probably even
Dr. Lugbani, just to be sure that we still have you. Dr. Oyeleye, rather, just to be sure that you're still there. All right, we seem to have a network challenge. We'll just take a break and then we'll return, try and reconnect with Dr. Oyeleye and continue that very interesting conversation. Stay with us.
I'm Lunge. I'm a passionate environment advocate and a published author.
I am the founder of Celebration, a businesswoman, and a fashion icon.
I am a wealth coach and a real estate developer.
I am Amako Arakwe. I'm a corporate commercial lawyer and an entrepreneur.
Barkamu da warhaka. I am Ramatu Shehu Oyibo, an entrepreneur and a business coach.
I am the voice of an average Muslim woman, an hijabite, and a lawyer.
I am a polymath and a serial female entrepreneur.
I am Murayo Afolabi Brown, Managing Director, TVC Entertainment. I'm a media consultant, producer, and broadcaster.
The ladies of Your View are made of women from different professions, tribes, cultures, and religion. Join us every Monday to Friday as we share our views on topical and social issues.
There is always more to a story than the screaming headline. The part of a story that is not told casts a shadow. It's like the part of an object that is not reached by light. On TVC News, I'm able to explore the many angles there are to a story, talking to stakeholders, asking the difficult questions, and digging for facts. I believe the viewers are able to make a better decision if they're well informed and understand not just a part, but the complete story. TVC News, first with breaking news.
Good morning, Marina Station and all the passengers. Efficient, it's comfortable.
This development will go a long way in reducing congestion and emission.
The trains are a long-term solution to Lagos traffic challenges.
This is where we take the final decisions on policies, programs of government that will have to ensure that the narration of Lagos as a PLC is taken very, very seriously.
This is a major pedestrian bridge linking Oyinbo here to Apapa Road over there.
With this overpass, we are providing what we call a permanent solution.
This place is one of the most dangerous areas at the biosecurity environment.
This can go into the news and every crumbs of your neighborhood.
Our goal is to remain as Africa's model megacity, to move our GDP from the 5-6 position to the 3rd position, and we believe it's achievable with all the commitments we have.
Explore the city of Lagos, where dreams are made and possibilities are endless. Amadedoja Salamadini. I live in Lagos, inside Lagos.
Thanks for staying with us. We have now successfully reconnected with Dr. Oyeleye. Thank you so much, sir, for staying with. I just wanted to ask you about, because one of the things they've talked about is, in terms of dealing with food insecurity in the country, is that we have to produce more of what we eat. Do we still have the luxury of depending on one part of the country for our food and where it comes from?
Yeah, a good question, really. I've always been an advocate of what I will call a specialization, especially over the years, the various parts of the country have been endowed with the kind of climate and weather that can help them to produce specific types of crops. Like in the south, southwest, southeast, tuber and root crops are essentially common crops, common staple crops being produced. And then, of course, as you move to the middle belt, a combination of root and tuber crops and grains. And then, of course, when you move to the northern part of the country, essentially mostly grain and other kinds of cereal. Now, yes, of course, I think it's actually dangerous to depend only on one part of the country for food for the entire nation, because if something goes wrong, then of course the entire nation will be imperiled. So we really need to revisit the idea of this specialization, in which emphasis should be placed more on what the various agroecological zones of the country produce. And so we'll be able to add together to the food basket of the nation. But then, of course, in doing that, attention should be focused more on governance and administrative machineries, particularly not only the federal government, the state and the local governments. They have a lot of roles to play in all of this. In the past couple of years, maybe some 10, 20 years back, less and less attention actually had been given to agriculture in the practical sense of it. A lot is being said about it in many states, but not much is actually being done. And then at the federal level, there had been this idea of flip-flop, in the attention given to agriculture. Some, vote money for the agricultural sector, but it never really gets used for the purpose or is misapplied. And agriculture is not an area that politicians can afford to play politics with, because if a nation cannot feed itself, that nation is actually on its way to jeopardy. And there could be spontaneous chaos and uprising, like we've seen in cases of some countries in Africa. And we wouldn't want such to happen in Nigeria. So the responsibilities actually
and Dr. Ileye, how should that work, or how should that be addressed? Because we've seen the Anchor Borrowers program, in the last administration. We've seen fertilizers being given out freely or at half price. There have been seedlings also being given out. The impact that this has had, we are still not able to feed ourselves. So if politicians and governments, at all levels are to step in, what should they be doing? First of all, for climate resilient farming, and then to ensure that the nation can feed itself.
Okay, actually, there are a lot of disconnects between various parastatals and the ministries that I mentioned. Even within the agriculture ministry, between the federal and the states, there are a lot of disconnects. You mentioned Anchor Borrower Scheme. I was on your studio while Anchor Borrower Scheme was still operating, and I said it was not a good program because I couldn't see the critical mass of manpower and the technical people that would be able to implement such a program successfully. And it turned out to be, in the end, that Anchor Borrower was just a financial drain pipe. And it was such an embarrassment for a country. Because the question I asked them in your studio was that, where are the experts in the central bank to implement Anchor Borrower Scheme? When a whole Ministry of Agriculture is kept aside, and then central bank took over the fiscal responsibility of a ministry and left its own monetary policy core area of work, I think there was actually a distraction there and a misplacement of priority. So in retrospect, it was a wrong decision to have actually embarked on Anchor Borrower Scheme for whatever it was worth. And so now talking about what should be done. What should be done is this. The various ministries of agriculture in various parts of the country, in various states, should wake up to their responsibilities. And the civil service people who are there, many of them are actually experts also in their own right. And their knowledge, their exposure, their expertise should be put into use. And then, of course, the appointed officials, like the commissioners, should also articulate programs that are actually, that respond to the specific needs of their environment and even beyond. Because one, there's still the need for us, despite the fact that different parts of the country are expected to produce, different kinds of crops and based on their agroecological zone and their competitive advantage, there's still this need for us to move food across from one part of the country to another. It's happening in developed countries. As wide as the US is, a lot of food is being moved from the Midwest to the extreme western part of the country to the eastern part of the country, from the area where a lot of food is being produced. I mean, covering thousands of kilometers.
So Dr. Oyele, I'll just give you 30 seconds to quickly wrap up because we're totally out of time.
Hello?
I was saying that I'm going to give you 30 seconds to wrap because we're out of time.
I didn't hear the statement. Can you go over it again?
All right, we do have to leave it there, Dr. Oyele. Thank you so much for your time. An agri-business analyst, Dr. Olukayode Oyele. Thank you for your time on Standpoint. All right, that's Standpoint this week. Remember, you can watch the repeat broadcast at 11 p.m. tonight and 5 a.m.